There we go. Okay. So in our last shiur, we were talking about Maris Ayin. Okay, and so just to recap, there were it wasn't a simple thing, Maris Ayin, but the basic idea of Maris Ayin, just to sum up again, is that we not only have to do the right thing, but we also have to be seen to be doing the right thing. Okay, and it's not so much because we're worried that somebody else is going to think that we're sinners and doing the wrong thing. Rather, we're worried about other people actually learning the wrong thing from what we're doing and going and doing the wrong thing themselves by misinterpreting our actions and thinking that something prohibited is actually permitted. Okay, so and in the context of Basa B'chalav, we had all these questions about what happens if you want to use almond milk or some sort of milk substitute, and would you be permitted to cook them together, and what difference does it make if you have a heker meaning some kind of sign that shows that what you're doing is actually permitted. For example, we said sprinkling almonds around the jug of almond milk, or something similar to that. So just to recap a couple of these things, let me just toss a couple of review questions at you. Well, let me ask this as a shaila to the team over here. What do you think? Can I eat a parava hot dog with butter? Where is the problem of Maris Ayin? So you got a soya dog, and you spread butter on your roll and put that together. Is there an issue of Maris Ayin there?
Sounds like it should be.
There certainly would be, even and the machlokas, even if you do it privately.
Okay, so that's so right. So now that your first instinct is to say, well, this looks like beef. It could be a beef dog, never mind, and that would be basa d'oraisa. Yeah, it's not actually cooking, because it's not, unless, look, I suppose you could find a sort of an edge case where it could technically be cooking, is if you took a beef dog off the barbecue where it's still piping hot and it's a big thick thing, so it's called a davar gush, and then it's got the din of a kli rishon. That's another little technicality that we've got over here, and you put that straight onto the butter, you might have an issue of cooking basa b'chalav over there. Remember, basa b'chalav is only asur min Torah if it's actually cooked together. Okay. Now, whereas if something has been sitting in the pan, they took it off the barbecue and it's been sitting in the pan and cooling down, and now you put it onto a roll with it's no longer really a kli rishon. It's not that hot anymore. So anything that it cooks would probably be at worst derabanan. But more the point over here, there's a modern commentary by called the Kosher Ephod, written by Rav Chanoch Dov Padua, Zeichet Tzadik Livrocha. So when they say Zeichet Tzadik Livrocha in the notes, that probably means that he's somebody from this generation, that somebody at least remembers. When you say Zeichet Tzadik Livrocha, I don't know. Maybe I may be wrong about this, but it seems to me that you wouldn't necessarily say the Chazon Ish Zeichet Tzadik Livrocha unless you had known him. Anyway, the Cheshev Ephod, this says that one can eat margarine with meat because it's common to use margarine. Okay, so it all depends on what's culturally well known, and what's common in society. So since margarine's been around for a long time and everyone knows about margarine as a butter substitute, personally, I consider margarine marginally less healthy than melting a credit card over the bread. But be that as it may, a lot of people do eat margarine, and it's known as a parava butter substitute. So there's no issue with spreading margarine on your bread, and nobody's going to make a mistake because everyone knows what margarine is. And using that same logic, soya dogs by this stage are very well known. It's not uncommon to find vegetarian hot dogs, and therefore it probably would not even be a shiloh of Maris Ayin once something is so well known. And I think a lot of these questions also apply to our milk substitutes. Now that actually comes with the next question. How is it that we can serve parava ice cream at the end of a meat suda without making an announcement that the ice cream is parava? Doesn't it look like we're eating milk after eating meat? To which we answer pretty much the same thing, because again, it's a well-known custom. The parava ice cream is as common as milk ice cream, basically, especially in Israel. I don't know what it's like. It's not so easy to find parava ice cream in Chutz La'aretz, but it's available. It's certainly available. And so the same thing happens. There's no din of Maris Ayin when something is so common that anyone who makes the assumption that this is milchik is just completely ignorant and has it's not a reasonable mistake to make.
If you have a stick of margarine on the table next to a stick of butter, are they really distinguishable?
I'd be able to tell the difference.
Would most people?
It's a good question.
So then in the first case, wouldn't you have to have the margarine label there also, just in case?
Well, once again, it doesn't really matter. It's the same thing as parava coffee creamer. Parava coffee creamer can look pretty much like milk, but there's no need to label it as such.
But you have to know who's serving it, don't you? Otherwise, you would expect to see a label.
Expand that out a little bit more about who is serving it. What do you mean by that?
I'm invited to somebody's home. I'm not 100% sure that they know all the halachos. I'm not sure. And they tell me that...
Well, back up a second. Why are you eating there?
Because I don't want to say no. Maybe it's a family member. I don't know. For whatever reason. There are many extenuating circumstances where I'm there.
Right.
No, so could be in that situation. Maybe then he has to be extra careful. But in a situation where you're eating at somebody who is 100%, then you don't have to.
Sure, but I can also argue that almond milk is also pretty common. So why would you have to have almonds spread around anything?
Well, that's exactly the thing. Is that it changes according to time and culture. I mean, the halachas that we're seeing over here were written in the 16th century. So that's at a time when almond milk was certainly not as common as it is today. And there's a very good argument to be made that this halacha is no longer applicable. I mean, okay, it's it's paskind and whatever, and maybe that's become a minhag or whatever. But there's a very strong argument to say that yes, you're right. There's no need to put almonds around it. You can see, everyone knows that there's parava milk around, and nobody's going to make the mistake of thinking that you're allowed to serve this milk with chicken or meat or whatever it is. And the next question somebody asked is an almond milk box also sufficient for a heker? Well, yes, definitely. The box that it comes in is most definitely a heker if it's got that the hechsher that says parava. I mean, you don't get a much better heker than that.
You still do the same thing. The margarine comes usually in a different wrapping. So if you put it,
let's say you've made balls of it and served it in a nice dish, and so it looks pretty on the table.
I would have to question, I guess. I don't know. I would trust the people, but I would still ask. Sometimes people make a mistake. Somebody could
look. It's possible. It's possible that you're like eating at the home of the newly from who don't know all the halachas, and So yeah, there is a possibility that they might not know the halachas, but I think when you're in that situation, you already got to be, all your feelers out.
All right. I mean, sometimes people make a mistake. You know, if you're baking or something, I mean, somebody might reach for the sugar by accident get the salt, put it on. So the same thing could happen to the refrigerator. They could reach for the margarine and grab the butter by mistake and make, you know.
Yes, actually, there was in one shul, actually in the Pretoria shul, as I recall, they had a bit of a fiasco in what that later became known as the Rama drama, and the South Africans will know what that means. Rama is a brand of margarine, but it has milk ingredients, so it's a halavi margarine.
That's funny because that reminds me of a story that I heard, that there was a big barbecue, all from people there, and everybody was getting ready to eat the stuff and put the rolls and everything, and someone comes screaming in and saying, "The rolls are milkic. Do not eat them. Do not touch them." You know, they were.
Wait, this must have been Chutz La'aretz.
Chutz La'aretz, yeah. The rolls were milkic,
yes.
and
because you're not allowed to make a milkic bread.
Yeah, that's a problem in and of itself.
Yeah.
Milkic rolls.
Yeah, we'll cover that at some point. Sorry, Donna, say it again.
Set of parav stuff for my challah baking. I bake challah for Shabbos for my parents, and I've got a complete set of parava baking trays, parava mixing bowls, parava measuring cups that I keep completely separate from everything else.
Right. Okay, that's admirable to keep things like a separate parava things. As it will transpire, if you know what you're doing, you probably don't even need to do that. But I'm not going to discourage you from doing what you're doing, because that's great.
You hear of stories. A friend of mine who went on a cruise, and they had ice cream actually. And the place even had a good hechsher, and the ice cream turns out, instead of being parva ice cream, it ended up being milchig. And one of his kids is allergic to milchig, and they had like an allergic reaction. You know, so and there was a whole problem afterwards. Yes, I mean, you hear from time to time these type of stories, you know, even with a good hechsher and with that. But I guess generally speaking, if you could trust the hechsher, you got to assume it's you know, if they say it's parva, it's parva. If it's milchig, it's milchig.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, non-Jews who have milk allergies, in Chutz La'aretz especially, will train themselves to look for kashrut symbol and look for something that says parva. Because they know if the Jews say it's parva, there's for sure no milk in it.
Clever.
Yes.
Unless it's mislabeled.
Unless it's mislabeled. And by the way, it's not always entirely accurate, because it is possible to have something that's parva that does have milk traces, because it'll be, if it's less than 1 in 60. So for example, if it was used on equipment that was used also for making dairy, that can still be considered parva. But it might nonetheless have some traces of milk. So it depends how allergic somebody is to milk, whether they should be worried or not. I mean, you do see that when people talk about allergens, like nuts, you'll often see warnings on labels saying, "Warning: this product is made on an assembly line that is also used for nuts." So it may contain traces of nuts or something like that. Yeah, and all right. I think that's probably enough revision on Maris Ayin for now. Oh, one more interesting question, just to remind you, what is the din of basar chaya? Basar chaya is venison. Are you allowed to, let's say if you want to cook basar chaya with almond milk, do you need to make any heker? Can you treat it? Does it have the din of cooking with regular meat or cooking with chicken?
It's a chaya. Chaya is different.
Chaya is different. So you're saying it should be treated like chicken. In other words, we'll be more lenient on Maris Ayin with it. Yeah. So actually, you couldn't have gone wrong with this answer, because it's a machlokes. You're right. That the Darchei Tshuva says that it has the din of chicken in terms of Maris Ayin. But the other Avram says because venison looks a lot more like beef, because it's from a mammal, the meat looks is almost might be almost indistinguishable from beef, and therefore we should be machmir and give it the din of meat, considering relating to Marius iron. So there you go. All right. We're going to move into the next siman in Shulchan Aruch over here. So we're now in 87. That's Pei Zion, siman Sif Hey. So number 5. So 87 halacha 5, and we're going to be talking about some other another interesting subject, which is eggs. Now eggs, as we know just from our common usage, eggs are completely parava. So what could be the issue with eggs? Well, here's the issue with an egg, is that an egg is formed inside the chicken's body. And what happens if you shecht a chicken and find an egg inside it that's at some stage of development? Now, while something is attached to the chicken, it's chicken. So if you shecht it, if it's part of the chicken's body, it's shechted and it's kosher and it is basari. But if it is fully developed and all that it needed was just to be laid, then it's a fully formed egg. Well, then we have an interesting question on our hands over here. So the Shulchan Aruch says on the subject, Beitzim hanimtzaim be'ofos. You find a chicken inside you find an egg inside a shechted chicken. Imheim gemuros, if they are completed, dahainu, which means sheyesh lahem chelbon v'chelmon. Okay, so chelbon, you can remember if you get confused between chelbon and chelmon. Here's an easy way to remember: is that chelbon looks like chalav, which is white. So the chelbon is the white of the egg, and the chelmon is the yellow. So if it has already developed to the point where it has distinguishable yolk and albumin, and even though it is, and I'm not going to go too deep into this term right now because we're going to analyze this later. Ma'ura begidin means it is just the word ma'ura means like it is coated, or it comes from the root of or, which is skin, with an iron. Ma'ura begidin. So it is coated with gidim, which is like sinews, which means that which gives the feeling that it's somewhat attached to the bird, but we'll get into the details of what is Ma'ura Begidim over here. Hareze Gemura. This is considered a completed egg, umutar le'ochla b'chalav, and it is parava. It is parava, and it is, and you can cut it away from the rest of the chicken and serve it with milchiks.
You're not talking about the hard shell outside now. You're talking about the albumin.
We're talking about this is found inside the chicken. The shell only hardens once the chicken has laid it.
Once it laid it, then it comes as it's coming through. It gets a coating on it. That's
I think it hardens in contact with air.
Right.
Okay. Aval im ein la ele chelmon, but if it only has yolk, asur levashel b'chalav. So apparently, in the development of the egg, it starts out just with yolk, and that sort of contracts into and it later gets filled with the white. Okay. So at that point, it is still considered part of the chicken's body. Okay, and you would not be permitted to cook that with milk. Aval. However, if you nonetheless went ahead and ate it, and only ate the part of the chicken that is the egg, okay, then it doesn't make you fleishik. It doesn't put you in fleishik's jail. Okay, so if you've so that shows that we're dealing with an interesting little gray area over here. That it's not. It's fleishik enough that we're not going to let you cook it with milk, but if you ate it, then you can go right afterwards and have your cup of coffee, have a cheese sandwich, whatever else it is that you want. You just can't have it with the milk cakes. Okay. So let's take a look at this halacha over here. Okay, so
isn't that similar to, if I have this right, if that's similar to like if you had someone baked cookies or something like that in a milking oven that wasn't used, let's say, for 24 hours, but that maybe they couldn't use that having it was supposed to be parve. You couldn't have it with coffee and milk or something like that. Am I correct? Am I saying it backwards?
No, I don't think that doesn't sound correct to me. I mean, you just give me the case again.
Someone baked cookies or cake or whatever, but they made it not. It's you can't have it with you. Like you're having a cup of coffee in the morning and you want to have some of these cookies. You can't have them together. You should
cook them in you cook them in a fleishik oven.
Right. So you have to.
Well, it depends on what else was in the oven at the time.
Supposedly nothing, unless they cooked the night before or something like that.
Okay, so I mean, this is something that we will deal with later, but I'm going to just give you a quick synopsis of this halacha, by demonstration with an example, a very practical example that was frequently needed to be applied in Jewish history, where Jews lived. They didn't necessarily have bakeries. Okay, bakeries back in the day, you needed to have like a big professional oven, and and in a poor Jewish community, you didn't necessarily have somebody who had the money to buy a baking oven to bake kosher bread and pastries and whatever else. So what they would do is they would roll their dough. They would make sure that they made kosher dough and everything, all the ingredients were fine. And they would go to the non-Jewish baker and say, could we rent your oven for a couple hours to bake our bread, please? What's the non-Jewish baker had in the oven? Who knows? Who knows what he had in that oven? Certainly no guarantees about what he had in there. I mean, pork pies, whatever you want. You have no idea what he's had inside that oven. And the Jews would go in there and they would just make sure that there's no mamashas, no actual treifus inside the oven. The oven's reasonably clean, and put their kosher bread in. Make sure it's not in contact with anything treif, but inside the same oven that's had treifus, mamish glatt treif inside that oven, and bake their bread. Okay, and that was 100% mutar. We'll get into the reasons why at a later stage, because that's a bit more of a discussion. But the basic idea is that there's no transfer of taste. Everything inside there is dry. Okay, the bread is dry, the cookies are dry, whatever it is that you're baking inside is dry. So there's no steam, so there's no taste transfer. So even if there is mamish treifus absorbed in the walls of the oven, and there little dried, crusted bits of treifus around the edges of the oven, you would actually need for some kind of steam to fill up the oven, get into the treifus, and then drip back into the food in order to make it treif. And since there's no like a cloud of steam, you're talking about mamish, a cloud of steam that's going to fill up the oven and drip back in order to transfer some kind of taste of treifus. And there we're talking about mamish isser over here. What you're talking about is a fleishik oven, which is all mutar. It's all, everything inside there is kosher.
Sometimes my daughter will bring for Shabbos. She'll bring cookies or cake, and she'll say, I'll have it after davening. Kiddush, I might have some cookies coming in. And she'll say, you can't have those with milk. Save it for later or something.
Okay. With respect, I think she's wrong. I think she would actually have to have cooked them with meat in the oven, with like a roast in gravy, the roast with gravy in it, in the oven at the same time as she was baking the cookies, in order for any kind of fleishik taste to get into the cookies.
All right, I'll check with her. I'll ask her.
So yeah. So, I mean, you have to get exactly what's the case, and we can find out the halacha. But in general, there is no problem with baking parava cakes, cookies, whatever, inside a milk oven, inside a fleishik oven, and having them whenever you want with whatever you want. They're 100% parava.
That means I missed out on a lot of cookies. Okay.
Oh man, rewind your life.
Not that I need them, but okay.
Okay. Back to our eggs. That's okay. So we said Ma'ura Begidin. So now we're talking about this whole idea of the egg that's inside the body of the chicken, partially formed, fully formed, whatever the case is. The source of this whole discussion comes from the Gemara in Beitza, surprisingly enough. The Gemara of Beitza. Okay, if somebody shechts a chicken and finds eggs inside it that are completed, finished developing, they are allowed to be eaten with milk. Thus paskins the Gemara. However, Rabbi Yaakov says that if they are Ma'ura Begidin, they are asked to eat with milk. Okay, so this is a machlokes Tanaim. Sorry, Rabbi Yaakov, beg your pardon. Rabbi Yaakov is an Amora, I think. It's a machlokes Amoraim. Okay, so so it's a machlokes Amoraim if you're allowed to, if the that if they are Ma'ura Begidin, whatever Ma'ura Begidin we define to be. There's a minority opinion that says that's considered fleishiks and may not be eaten with milk. Okay. Now the Tur is is a one of the late Rishonim who's pretty much who the Shulchan Aruch bases his format on the Tur. Okay, the Torah says that eggs that are found in chickens are mutar to eat with milk if they are completed. However, if they're not gemuras, then they're like the chicken. So if they're not, so that sounds like the Chachamim who disagree with Rabbi Yaakov. Okay, so it depends on whether they're considered completed, and now we're going to find out what is the definition of completed. What's called a beit gemura. So according to Rashba, any egg found in the chicken that has both the yolk and the albumin is called gemura. Okay, that's our dividing line according to Rashba. Is yolk and albumin. According to Rashi, if the chelmon has finished developing, even if it's just the yolk that's finished developing, it's called gemura. So that's a little more makil according to Rashi. Okay, what is Rashi's definition of ma'uras begidin? It means that the eggs are attached to the ovary. So we said that skin of gidin is the definition there is that they're still attached to the ovary. Now, according to the Beis Yosef, ma'uras begidin means the word here is shiraiki sumki, which is red streaks. So that's again, it's a stage in the development of the egg that it's just to do with the appearance of the outside of the egg. Does it appear to have red streaks in it? In which case, he's saying that that's still considered that's considered what is the term again? Ma'ura begidin. Okay, and the Shach learns like Rashi that it means attached to the ovary. So the Mechaber, that's the Shulchan Aruch, paskins like the Rashba. In other words, that it's chelbon and chelmon, and that's what we just saw inside the Shulchan Aruch. However, the Shach brings many Rishonim who paskin like Rabbi Yaakov in the Gemara. It says that Ma'ura Begidin is actually considered fleishiks. You're not allowed to eat with milk. So therefore, if the eggs are Ma'ura Begidin, even if both the chelmon and chelbon are complete, it's still asur even b'diavad to have with milk. Okay. However, even if only the chelmon was finished and the eggs are Ma'ura Begidin and they were cooked with milk, so in general, we would not permit that, but the Shach will rely on Rashi and say, okay, hefsid meruba. That, by the way, is maybe an opportunity to just go into a little bit of a tangent about some of the reasons that we can often find to be makil when we have a machlokes in halacha. And actually this is a good opportunity to discuss this, because a lot of the time I'll be giving you a bunch of achronim who saying contradictory halachas. This one says mutar, this one says it's asur, and what do we do when we see this? I mean, often it'll be we'll have rules of saying, we're Ashkenazim, we're going to follow the Ashkenazi poskim in general. But if you have two Ashkenazi poskim, let's say the Shach versus the Taz, okay, so typically we'll go like the Shach versus the Taz, but that's not always the case. And sometimes you might say, okay, it's worthwhile to be machmir like this person. It's not always 100% clear who we should do the halacha like, and a lot of it is going to depend on how how much it's going to cost you to be machmir. Because if it's not much of a loss, then you can say, okay, okay, so I'll take a little bit of a hit. You have let's say you have an egg, and you crack it open, and it's got like this little faint red streak in it. And honestly, battery eggs nowadays, it's almost impossible for them to become fertilized. So it's most likely the red paint from the shell of the egg. Or it could be it could just be some faint discoloration. But if you're financially well off and it's not that much of a big deal, and it's not like you're preparing something on Friday afternoon just before Shabbos, you say, okay, I can be machmir on this. It's probably okay, but I'm going to be machmir and throw out this egg. Okay, you can do that. But if somebody is like financially not so strong, and the loss of an egg actually really does hurt, or so that's one possibility, is what's called a hefset meruba. If it's coming at a big financial loss, then typically we'll say, well, if there are poskim who say that this is mutar, then rely on them. Rely on them because what you've got big shoulders to who permit that. And even though most people are being machmir on this particular thing, we don't want people to to go into financial hardship because of the fact that they're that they're trying to be machmir. Similarly, there's tzorech gadol, for a big need. And tzorech gadol is also a nice broad category of things that can give you room for leniency. One of the big ones is Erev Shabbos. You've been cooking your Shabbos meal, and it comes Friday afternoon, and suddenly you have a shaila on something. And if the shaila comes out aser, you're not going to have what to eat for Shabbos, or you're going to be opening tuna cans or something like that. And that is, that's a big loss. That it's not a financial loss necessarily. It might be you've got the wealthiest family in the neighborhood who's suddenly got a kosher shaila on something that they cooked just on Erev Shabbos. And if they don't, if this comes out aser, then they're going to be eating tuna cans. So in that case, that's also called a tzarech gadol, and there's room for leniency if there are poskim, even if they're a minority view, that who can who permit in this particular case. And then that's in a situation that is called b'diavad. And again, just to mention those terms again, we generally try to paskin halacha lechatchila, that we want to, lechatchila in the first instance we want to do everything right, but b'diavad, something happens and messes things up, and now we say, okay, now that this has happened, what do we do? And at that point, once you're in a b'diavad situation, then the lechatchila halacha changes. You're now in a situation. Okay, it's happened. Now what? And then we find ourselves employing many different coolers.
Can I ask a question just
Go
for
ahead.
just for clarification? You crack open an egg, you have the chelmon, you have the chelbon, but you have a blood spot in the yolk. What do we consider that?
Okay, so the blood spot in the yolk. So let's just say you have a red spot. Let's not jump to the conclusion that it's blood.
Okay.
Okay. To tell you the truth, most of the time that this happens, it's actually because, especially in Israel, they print the size of the egg in red ink on the outside of the shell. And as often as not, you'll find that the little red coloring that you find inside your egg is a little bit of ink that's rubbed off from the shell.
It's porous. It goes through. This is
No,
like a coagulated.
No. I'm saying you crack the egg on the side of your glass,
right.
and you cracked it right through the writing, and the egg comes over the edge of the shell and rubs off a bit of the ink into the glass. You didn't see that happen. It happened really fast. But now there's suddenly a little bit of red floating just over your yolk or something like that.
Well, that would probably be like a gid. It would look like a gid, not like a coagulated dot.
Okay, So I guess you've got to have the eyes. You've got to be able to recognize what's what inside. Blood. Blood is not a pale red. It's a dark red.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start seeing actual dark red, now that's a real shiloh. That could very well be, but it's so rare, especially if you're buying battery chicken eggs, because they're not exposed to males, and so the eggs just cannot get fertilized. There's no way for them to get fertilized.
What did you call them? Battery what?
Battery chickens.
Never heard that expression.
Oh, okay. So basically, the chickens are. I mean, I actually, it's rather painful to think about it, because I've seen these chicken coops, and it evoked really nasty imagery in my mind, which I these just rows and rows of cages in which the chickens are sitting inside these cages, and they can't even perch. Like they're standing on sort of this angled cage, and as they lay the eggs roll down into a place that's easy for the people walking past to scoop them up and take them out. But that's the sort of general conditions. It's frankly inhumane. But what can I say? I still buy those eggs because to buy organic or free range chickens and eggs is probably double to triple the price. So they're supposedly healthier, but I've several times considered switching to getting organic or free range eggs. But nonetheless, in those conditions, you just have a whole bunch of female chickens lined up in cages, and with their feed and just laying eggs. There's no way that they're being exposed to a male. So if you're getting eggs that are the regular from battery chickens, there's no chance that they're going to be fertile.
But if they're not,
hmm?
I mean, if they're not battery chickens,
Right. So now, if you're talking about organic chickens, free range eggs, then you can have real shilohs. Yeah. So if you have blood inside the yolk, that might be a sign that the egg has started developing, and now you actually have a dead chicken over here that died without shechita, and it is considered an avela.
Is that like the Duracell rabbit? The ever-ready rabbit, the ones on a battery?
I didn't get that.
He's cookie deprived. Ignore him.
Okay.
Thanks, Larry.
Okay.
I like your question, Elliot.
You didn't get it. You didn't get it, Charles. You didn't get it.
I didn't hear it properly. That's why.
Oh, there's a rabbit called like the Doris. What is it? Duracell, or the ever-ready battery?
Duracell, the Duracell bunny.
Yeah, Duracell.
The Duracell bunny. Got it. Got it.
Well, so we could assume that all the eggs today in Israel and abroad are these battery like, is that like a
that's the normal kind of egg. If it's something different, then it'll be called organic, or it'll be called free range.
Wow.
Right. So they're probably healthier.
My mother taught me to crack the eggs into a glass before you add them to the mixture and check them.
Yeah, that's right. We do, and we do that as well. It's kedai to have that habit, because if one day you do have a organic egg or a free range egg, you're just in the habit of always cracking eggs into a glass. But the fact is that when you boil eggs, you boil eggs without checking them.
True.
Yeah.
I was wondering
so since you can check the eggs, you do. It doesn't cost you anything to crack the eggs into a glass before you fry them.
And if you see some red, it doesn't matter? You're saying it doesn't matter?
Typically, it won't matter. It won't. But if you want to, if you want to be machmir, tavo alav bracha. As long as you're not being paranoid.
Could be goes into, maybe I'm just thinking of what you said, goes into Marasayan maybe even though we spoke. Even though we could assume that the eggs today are these battery chicken eggs, but maybe somebody sees you, cracking an egg in the glass cup and there's red in there, and they don't know this whole thing. They'll assume moving forward, for any type of eggs, maybe that, I don't know.
Yeah, Taka, that's actually a very good application of Maris Ayin, is that if you have, if something's got blood in it, or something red in it, you don't want somebody to make the mistake of thinking that, oh, it's mutter to have an egg that's got blood in it, and then they go home and they take their free-range eggs. Yeah, Mark, I'm going to address your question. Right, we still boil eggs in odd numbers for similar reasons. That boiling eggs in odd numbers is a Bobbermeister. It's 100% Bobbermeister. I remember when I was in yeshiva, and learned and I took a course in Hashgacha in South Africa. So the people who the person who was teaching the course, it told us the thing about odd numbers, and like I was there with a couple of my yeshiva friends, and we looked at each other and said, "What? Odd numbers? Where did this come from?" And it's absolutely, completely without any source. It's a Bobbermeister. It has nothing. There's no basis in halacha.
So why would custom?
I know it was a widespread custom.
Why we actually I understand 3 or more actually, but I've never.
You understand what?
Numbers.
3 or more.
3 or
so
more.
I even asked the question about 3 or more, because why would 3 help?
Well, because if there's a chashash that 1 is an issue, then 2.
And what would be the issue of the 1 egg? Are you talking about an egg that's potentially an avela? So you're cooking 3 eggs together, 1 of which is potentially an avela. Yeah. Okay. How many eggs do you need to? How many eggs do you need to nullify an avela?
It's never going to help
60.
Because it's
60.
But that's only if they're in a mixture. If they're going to be eaten individually, it's not going to help either.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is that if you have the majority is for yavesh b'yavesh. We spoke about that in the past year. That yavesh b'yavesh is if you have 3 individual items. You have
Yep.
3 eggs that were cooked separately and have fallen together, and you know that one, and even if you know for certain one of them came from a non-kosher bird. Okay, and now but there's no way of telling which one came from the non-kosher bird, because they all look the same for whatever reason. Okay, I mean it's not a very realistic situation. Let's rather talk about you had 3 chicken wings. Okay, and one of them came from a treifa bird, from a bird that was shechted treif. Okay, so those 3 wings, yavesh b'yavesh, those are considered all kosher because you have a majority of kosher against them. You're not allowed to cook them all together, because if you cook them all together, then the taste is going to spread, and vada, you've got something treif inside there that's going to spread the taste throughout all 3 of them. Then they're all treif. But if you grill them each individually, okay, and then you can eat each one after the other, because there we go after majority rules. But that's only yavesh b'yavesh. When you have lach b'lach, you have 3 eggs that you are cooking together. You are boiling 3 eggs together. If one of them is treif, you need 60 against it. So even the 3 egg story is like the only time when we went into it in yeshiva, the only time that it would actually make a difference to have 3 eggs rather than 2 is if the 1 egg was a safek treifa. If you had a doubt about it, so maybe it is, maybe it isn't, then there was some real edge case where you would be able to say, okay, because it's a safek, we're going to go by majority instead of by 60. But it was a real edge case, and it wasn't worth talking about anything like that la halacha. If you want to boil 1 egg, 2 eggs at a time, 100%, no difference. And the odd number of eggs, we complained to the Beis Din in South Africa, to the kashrus department, and said this is completely not la halacha. And I was concerned that some rookie mashgiach was going to walk into the kitchen of a catering division and count the eggs and say, "Oh my God, there's 64 eggs here. You can't. It's not an odd number. We have to throw them all out." I said, no. That's just Bobbermeisters. It's absolutely no basis in halacha. Okay, we're out of time. We'll have to carry on with this with this next week. Any further questions before we carry on? Okay, Fine.
Thank you,
So
Jack.
we'll pick this up again next week. That was a very entertaining session. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Good,
Laila
thank you.
Tov.
Kodesh Tov.
Laila Tov.
Kodesh Tov.